Hello, Mud Socks ladies. It's Chris again. Not really a pro at this kind of thing, but situation has forced me to have to go this route for the Color Confidence class. So I just want to start with a little bit of an overview, showing you some of the items that I have made in the past, and kind of explain my reasoning for going the direction that I went. What you see on the screen right now is a table runner, and there are three stars. It is all the same half square triangle pattern, but you can see how varying the location of the colors creates a little bit different look of the stars, because different aspects of that star will pop out to you depending on how you have arranged the colors. When I start contemplating a pattern that I want to do, if it starts with the fabric, a focus fabric that's just really easy for me to build my palette. In the case of red, white, and blue, you can never go wrong with red, white, and blue, but you will notice that this is a very scrappy look because I've used different pieces of red, different navies, and then the different neutrals. So they all can work together to create a very unified look, because they're all in a basic range of color. The reds don't really go to pink or burgundy, so they're very consistent in their tone of red. The only one that isn't consistent is my neutral, because I had some more of a yellow, more of a cream. So just where you want to place those can affect the look. I tried to keep them on this block to the outer corners and the inner corners just to unify it. And then here again, the placement of those colors determines that overall look. And here just using the more yellow tones and not even having any of the cream, but filling in those other areas with the blue and the navy, give that effect. The next item is my challenge that I forgot to show at the challenge reveal in July. But with this piece, I chose this fabric while I was at a shop hop. Just picked up a yard of it, didn't have any reason, rhyme, or thought about what I was going to use it for, but I just liked the color. I liked the print. So I picked that up. And then when the challenge came about, I kind of just pulled that out and started looking at what is in the print. And you can see that there are different tones of this reddish pinkish color. So it was just very easy to pull in a dark and a medium. And then my background plays off of that little vine and floral design. So that's what kind of pulled this all together. If you look closely, you can see that there is a gold in there, but the gold is so recessive that I really didn't want to focus on that. And I liked that I was building this block with the light and dark of the same color. The next item is a Bonnie Hunter mystery that I did. Again, you can see I'm very partial to red, white, and blue, but with her design, she had used a completely different color palette. But I chose to go with the red, white, and blue, adding gold and browns to try to get the contrast that I needed. But you will notice that sometimes your contrast level can be very questionable, especially when you have smaller pieces and you've got darker tones. So you really want to find things that have a very good high contrast if you're going to be using them in a pattern that's going to tie them next to similar colors or similar values. You can see in brown areas. There's only 4 different browns there, and 2 of them are so very close that when they're paired next to each other and from a distance, they look like the same color. But when you view them up close, you can see they are separate. So that's also something to keep in mind, is how close in value in the perception of a dark, a medium, a light, or the depth of the color. Because you can see this is a very much a medium brown, a medium brown. Those are 2 darker. But even when these 2 medium tones are together, there's enough value difference that you do perceive those as being separate colors, whereas those 2 darker tones together are so close that you don't really get that perception. And then this is another Bonnie Hunter mystery. This is the current year's, or the 2019 Frolic. She always gives you a painter's palette, and she uses the paint chips from the store to show you what the true colors are of her originals, and then you can take those out and to the store, to your stash, and get a match with her, one of her colors, which is where this color I have placed was a much different color in the paint chip, but it just didn't work for the colors that I had chosen, so I didn't go with that. And I found this, which you can see has a very obvious print, but sometimes when you're away from the quilt, that print kind of just blends in to itself, and you don't really view it as a print, or it doesn't really stand out that it's got a darker kind of a blue color in there. So you always want to just work on having a high contrast between your items, and in some cases when you're farther away, those 2 items might read as the same just because they have the same lightness or darkness, just as in the browns of the previous quilt. So you really kind of want to have a good judge of the distinction between 2 different colors, but they are the same value. And now what ties this all together is the border print that I actually found after the fact. Could not believe that I got such a close representation of the colors in this border fabric from viewing it online and not even having any of these to compare to that. So that was just one of those lucky finds. And if I purchased that border fabric first and tried to go take it and match exactly those colors, I would have never found what I wanted, especially not in my stash. So those are just a few examples of items that I have finished and kind of the method behind putting those colors together. In the next step, I'm going to show you some examples of color pools and try to explain my process in pulling those together. And one more, just because I love it so much. I had purchased this background fabric in just a little fat quarter and just was enamored with it. And when I put it away into my stash, it just happened to fall into a bucket that had these 2 colors in it, and it just worked for me. It just popped. There is no rhyme or reason sometimes to my head and the way I think and the way I pull colors together, but sometimes it just is something that is pleasing to your eyes. May not be pleasing to someone else because they may have a bias about the color that you use, but if you love it, go with it. Okay, sample 1. This is a piece that actually was included in a fat quarter bundle. Wasn't maybe something that I would necessarily just have gone out and bought, but I liked the range of the fabrics that were in the bundle, so I bought that. But when you are looking for options or something to use, you can start with a focus fabric. Start with something that is going to evoke an emotion, just a feeling in you. and you just want to use that in some way. A lot of times this type of print needs to be in a large piece as far as a patch or a border or the background of a block or just something that is going to show the full range of the design. Anytime you focus in on a smaller area and lose any of the background, then that is the color that is going to stick out. So if I had a piece that was only this big, that is going to be the color that is seen. That's going to be the color you would have to play off of. Whereas if I had an area that was really fully encapsulating all of this leafy green, then that would be the color that I focus on. But if you're going to use it as a whole, then you can just play off of all the colors that you perceive in the piece. So if I start with this, it's my focus fabric. I'm going to add a background fabric. And I do apologize for the way the camera is going to perceive the color and change the tones somewhat. But if we look here, the basic, I can't even think of the word. What you see out of this is a very off-white to an oyster color. There is a perception of these tones of the color, but for the most part, this is my neutral, this is my background. It's going to play off of the other pieces. It's going to support the other pieces, but it's not the focus. Then I'm going to pull in a color that is going to tie into somewhere in this print, and I really can't stress enough how what I'm seeing in actual real life is not maybe what you're seeing on the monitor, because I see this as a very green blue, whereas it's showing on my viewfinder as a very blue color. Let's see if I can get, it's probably really not going to change the tone, but I'm trying to see if I can't get that color to show what I see. Not working, but I do really assure you it is more of this greenish color that you see here in the print. And then I'm going to pull in some of the green, chartreuse limey green color that you see there in the side of the, or I'm sorry, on the leaf pattern. So there, that would be an example of how I am using that background fabric, or I'm sorry, the focus fabric, to pull in the other pieces that I would use from background to piecing. And this is, these four are because of the pattern that I'm using, the Indiana Star block. The next piece that I am going to show you is a piece I purchased out in Colorado when we were out there visiting friends. And once again, it is really not as blue as what you are seeing on the screen. But here we have something that is a very subtle shading of colors. You can see very much gold is represented, different shades of green from a kind of an army green, a drab green, to a very deep blue green. Now with a background, you can go some different routes. You can go with your ubiquitous neutral background, something on a neutral ground, and here I've picked something that is going to pull in those colors, the gold and the teal green that's in the focus fabric. Or your neutral can actually be a solid, a semi-solid, in a lighter shade of one of the colors that you see in your ground fabric, your focus fabric. So if I'm going to do that, then how does that play against maybe the pieces that I'm going to pull in for the actual block piece? And here you can see I'm still keeping in some of those same tones, but this may not read very well against each other in actual cutting of blocks. The pattern that we're using is half square triangles, so those are going to be very well defined blocks in a 3-inch size, so you're going to get a good representation of the colors. So you want to be confident that the prints that you're putting against each other are going to read well. And then I might throw in a lighter shade of that same color, and hopefully with the difference of the patterns, that's going to read as a different a piece, but it may not. So your consideration is looking at all of your color choices in a mono shot, which is a monochrome, and taking all the color out so that all you see is the value. And I'm going to be attempting to include a shot of that so that you will see that in actual play here on the video. But if I'm not really that excited about this, well, what I could do, take that out and bring back in that gold. That could have been my neutral, but now it could be one of the blocks that's playing against the background, because it plays very well with the background. So that's a consideration. If I don't like this lineup, let's take that out and use that semi-solid. And there, it's going to be a little bit more toned down. There's not going to be a lot of fight against the actual block, because I'm not fighting with my prints, whereas this might have given me a little bit more of a fight. But your best bet whenever you pull anything together is to try a mono shot. And here, I'll see if we can get that for you. Here's a piece that I picked up in Florida while on vacation, because of course you always must buy souvenir fabric or souvenir yarn. And as you can see, very bold colors, very distinct colors. There is a very pale yellow to a little bit deeper gold. There are some different shades of orange, different shades of green. And just look at the piece that was also in the same shop. Pretty much spot on for the same colors that are in the background, that are in that stripe. So obvious choice. So now, what do I want to pair with it? Well, I'm going to pull in some green and very close to this stripe here. And I'm going to pull in some orange. And not really maybe an exact match of orange, but it really doesn't matter, because the overall perception, as long as it's in the same range, the same value, is it's going to read fine. But maybe I want to go a little bit bolder and pull in something that is a print. It's a background, but it still has a lot of those colors that you're seeing here in that stripe. The consideration is this is a very, very large print on this background. So is it going to be cut in a large enough size piece to actually get a good read of that, or is it going to end up being focused on this, which is going to read, you know, gold and oranges, or an area over here where it is a lighter shading of colors. So anytime you have a smaller print, you're going to get more of the effect of it as opposed to a larger print. The larger print might just lose some of that oomph when it's cut smaller. Another consideration is, do I even really want to go with something this light? Do I want to maybe try something that still pulls in all those colors, but has a little bit more depth of color instead of being more pale? Or maybe something in a completely different color background, going more of the greens as opposed to the beige or more of the orange. Another consideration is pulling in something that's, again, you know, it's still an orange, it's still going to match, it's going to be part of this range of color that I see in my stripe, but maybe it's got a little bit more impact. But again, you need to look at the size of the motif, the design, and how that is going to actually cut down to the size that it will be in your quilt. And so with a 3-inch half square triangle, you know, you're really basically cutting that image in half. So does that read well when it is paired with this for the half square triangle? And those are things that you can just kind of get a feel for by using your ruler and identifying that square area that is going to fall into your half square triangle, and then basically cutting it in half just to get a feel for how the ground of the print, which is the colors that you're going to be seeing, as opposed to in this case that ground is a beige, it is a background color, and how much of that is going to play with the design being very prominent in your half square triangle and cutting out more of the background and being viewed more as a orange or a gold fabric. This sample I'm going to show you is going to be kind of a lesson in how you can take completely different items that are really not something you would think you're going to put together, but if you're looking and judging from the fabric that you have, how you can build them out. So, of course, I'm going to add a background, and my background is going to pull from this color here, that putty color, so very obvious choice. And then I'm going to be looking in, and I've got this color here. Well, do I have something that is that color, that is that range? And I can pull in that piece there. And that piece actually even has that background color. So it's got a tie in there. And then I'm going to look and say, well, let's put a pop. Let's put something that is going to pop, and I'm going to add this gold. Now, you may like this, you may not. It really does come down to just a choice of colors based on your preference, based on your bias, based on what your eye sees. So there's no right or wrong. There's only what you're comfortable with. For me personally, these don't appeal to me as a mix, but if I was using the rules, then it should work, because I am keeping in the rule of pulling the colors from the focus fabric, but it just doesn't work for me personally. It may work for you though. For my last example, I'm going to pull a piece that I've had for a bit, and I'm determined that it's going to be something that was a Christmas inspired design, because when you look at it, you've got the basic Christmas colors. You've got some red, you've got some green, gold. So in thinking about this, looking at this, this is a very dark piece, it's a very deep piece, so I really don't want to go too light in my neutral. I don't want to go too high of a contrast. I want to be a little bit more subdued with it. So I might pull in, if I can get a good read on this, this is a little bit more gold in person than what you're seeing on that lovely computer screen. And I might try to actually get pictures of these colors where I don't have the light changing the tones. But I'm going to go with something that is not quite so bright, not quite so jarring in the difference between focus fabric and background. And then I'm going to pull in that red. It's just a little flower of red, but I'm going to throw in a red, and then of course I'm going to throw in a green. Because I've got such deep tones in the focus fabric, which will be my border, I don't want to go too light in the pieces that are going to play off of it, because you don't want to alter the overall look of it by going bright against a dark. You want good contrast between things, but you don't necessarily want to go too far afield of the tone of the piece. You don't want to go bright red with something that has a very gray or more of a dull tone. And actually this green is not so gray, it's a lot more yellow in my real view. And with the pattern that we're doing, it is basically a friendship star with an economy square in the center. And so for this, I thought, you know, I've got this little print, why not make this the center of my star? And then that's going to tie in with the background. So you can use, you know, 4 fabrics, add a 5th one in there, fussy cut for that center block. But what you're doing is just getting a range of colors that are going to play well with each other as you put them into the components for the block, having a contrast, having complementary colors, things that work together to overall make a very pleasing table runner. Okay, here I have prepared my first block, and what I'm going to do is be making the square in a square that forms the center of the friendship star. If you would like, you can just make your center a solid color, and all you would need is a 3.5 inch square piece of your center color. So what I have done is I have cut my piece that's the center 2 5/8 of an inch, and then I have cut 2 pieces that are a 2 3/8 inch square that has then been cut on the diagonal. And what I'm going to do is then sew these pieces to that center square, and I'm going to start by doing opposing sides. So I'm going to sew that real quick and we'll be right back. Once you have the 2 corners sewn on, then you're going to add these corners next. What I like to do before that step is go ahead and take my rotary cutter and ruler, and I just line it up so that it is in line with the side here, but then also that I've got a indication that it is straight across or square with this seam line, and I just go ahead and cut off those little dog ears before I then go ahead and sew the next piece to the edge. And whenever you're setting this up to sew, you want to kind of get that centered in between the edges so that you've got it fairly well centered and you know that you're going to be as square as possible. Once you have all of your sides sewn to that center square, you will have something that looks like this. I am making a 3-block table runner for a friend. So these are the pieces that I picked out in the sample video that I was showing earlier, one of those videos. And you'll notice that this one I have fussy cut. Since I needed a 2 5/8 inch square, I just laid my ruler over the motif and then kind of judging, where my square was going to end up, I moved my cutting ruler around, my rotary ruler, until I felt like I was fairly centered in that area, and then cut the dimensions of that 2 5/8 inch so that I could get a pretty sunburst in the middle of my square. Now I'm going to trim off the dog ears and the uneven edges, because no matter how much I try to make it a very even square, I am not quite there. But thankfully these measurements have a little bit of an allowance so that you can put your cutting ruler over your square. I'm trying to reduce that glare there, but not very successful. So for the moment I'm going to turn that off. But what I'm going to do is I need to have a 3 1/2 inch measurement out of this square. So I'm going to put my ruler on there, and I'm even noticing I'm not quite as good on my measurement as I wanted. So let's see if I can't find another one and see if I'm a little bit better there. Because believe me, I do fudge where needed. But what you're just going to do is trim off these dog ears and square up that square as much as possible to get your 3 1/2 inch center square for that friendship star. The next step is making the half square triangles that you will need, and you're going to make a total of 8 of these, and your combo of colors will depend on your particular layout of your colors that you're using, but there are very many different ways to do half square triangles. This is the easy angle, and with this you would cut a strip that's 3.5 inches wide, and then you line up the ruler along that straight edge there, and this top will be at that cutoff angle, and then you just cut across there and you move down the strip, turning this easy angle and then cutting your next strip along the straight edge here. But you can also cut a 4-inch square, and of course do the penciled lines 1/4 inch away from the center line. Just whatever you want to do in order to make those half square triangles, but you'll need the unfinished size to be 3.5 inches. 3.5 inches square. Okay ladies, now we're ready to build our runner. As you can see, I've got just 3 blocks in my runner. I'm making this for a friend who has a small table that I want to have her use this for. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare our layout to our project, and I'm going to build that here on my cutting mat. So I'm going to take my first square and orient it in the right direction, and then just keep taking my half square triangles, putting them in place, looking at the design that is on my computer, but you will be able to look at a design by coloring on the printout that you can use. So that gives you an idea. You can print it out as many times as you like so that you can try all kinds of different colorations. And there I have my first block. And so then I can go ahead and use those remaining blocks. And what I'm just going to do is stack them on top of each other so that I've got an easy way to see which way I need to lay the blocks, and I don't have to keep looking back at my picture, because I know once I determine where the new colors are going, all I have to do is just stack them on what I've already laid out. And then you will notice when you have directional fabrics, as you make half square triangles, they are going to end up pointing in a different direction. And there's the center for that block, and then my last block. And as you can see, I have built my table runner so that each block uses one of the 3 colors, one of those 3 basic colors in the star points, and then the other colors are used in the outer corners. And in talking about ground, when you're talking about fabrics and design, ground means what is perceived as the background in a print. And you can see these are the same fabric but very different presentation of the colors because of this being cut out of a certain area of the fabric that had more of the presence of the gold and this less. So sometimes those variations in color will play against a background or another color in your block that you didn't quite expect and would maybe kind of just kind of meld into the color. Not so obvious with this, but there are other times when you might notice that. So always be aware of how much of the background is showing or how much of the design is showing in something that you're using. Now, to go ahead and start building this block, you're going to take the top right corner, lay it over that center block. The middle right side, lay it over the center block. And then down to the lower right and lay it over the lower center block. Then you're going to do your 1/4 inch seam down all of those sides, and then when you have those together, you will then take and pair these, these and these, and create that seam. That will help you keep everything in order so that you're not getting something out of sequence. So I'm going to go ahead and do this first seam, and then I'll come back. Now here we have this first set of seams sewn on our block, and then we're going to take the top and we're going to match it up with that piece. That center will get matched up to that piece, and the bottom will get matched up there, and then we'll just stack these, and I will take them to my sewing machine and sew those seams. And here is my finished top. Not quilted yet, not quite. I just love my little fussy cut, so I wanted to make that the center block to maybe give it a little bit more highlight. But I hope that you've enjoyed this fractured video, and that you can gain some color, confidence, and make some awesome projects. Goodbye, ladies.